welcome back to Elite Literary Book Group. I'm Rachel Beck. I'm sorry I haven't done a video in a while. I can't even think of an excuse except for I just get to a certain point in the course where I go, oh my God, how much longer is this going to take? And with the Victorian novel, I should know better. But I knew I was being a little ambitious when I wanted to do this, especially since I knew a lot of people aren't going to read Jude the Obscure. But if you are reading Jude the Obscure, that's just very important to me. So I have to keep that in mind to keep me motivated. So anyways, last time we met little Father Time. And so the chapter that I'm on, which is chapter 4 of part 5. No, am I reading this correctly? Yeah, okay. Numerals. Okay, so they found him to be in the habit of sitting silent. I talked about the way he was before in the last video. His weird face set, his eyes resting on nothing substantial. And Sue makes a comment that his face is like the tragic mask of Melpomene, which is the muse of tragedy. And they make a lot of references, a lot of allusions to a tragedy for obvious reasons, which will be made clear, especially in part the 6th. I mean, it'll be a tragedy that you will, it'll blow your mind. You'll never forget this. So please try and stay with me. So little Father Time, and one more thing about his name. If you think about the words father and time, they're sort of a representation of death. The Father Time is going to catch up with all of us, some of us faster than others, and it's a negative thing. And what a negative thing to call a small child. You would have to be pretty facetious and pessimistic to think that I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this kid's name represent death. That's Hardy for you, and that's why Hardy has the reputation he has. I mean, we have to look at that. Of course, people called this Jude the Obscene. It was obscene then. This was just unimaginable that you would do this, especially when you see what happens. So at any rate, so here's the part, and he says his name. Father Time is what they always call me. It's a nickname because I look aged, they say. And you talk so too, said Sue tenderly. It is strange, Jude, that these paternally old boys have come from new countries. But what were you christened? I never was. Why was that? Because if I died in damnation, 'twould save the expense of a Christian funeral. Oh, your name is not Jude then, said his father with some disappointment. The boy shook his head. Never heard on it. Of course not, said Sue quickly, since she was hating you all the time. We'll have him christened, said Jude, and privately to Sue, the day we are married. Okay, so one little interesting thing here about Sue. Notice it's very subtle, but these things do come up, so I'm always going to point them out, and it'll make more sense at the end why. But notice that she seems a little taken back by the fact that he's not Christianed. This was very important. I mean, it's still important if you go to a traditional church, like a Catholic church or Orthodox church. I know in the Protestant church that you get baptized whenever you accept Jesus in your heart, and it's your decision. We don't give children a choice in the church. You're going under whether you like it or not. It's just like you're going to school. I mean, it's just the way it is. And one of the reasons that this would have needed to be done in their mindset, it would be that the mortality rate for children was so high. I mean, you wanted to go ahead and make sure they were baptized because, as you can see, that's what they believed. And as much as Sue is always trying to put up her legal case against the scriptures, against marriage, legal contract, all this BS. I can't do it. It's not romantic. It's not natural. She doesn't take this up. There are certain things about Sue that come out of her that are traditional. And I'll show you what I mean in something that she says. Again, it's very subtle, but I don't think I'm reading into these things too much because, for one thing, I know what's going to happen at the end. But that's why I'm kind of bringing it to your attention, because it is so subtle, but it is there. It does bother her that he's not Christian, as it would, you know. So, you know, what goes on in the next thing is like, okay, we have this child, we got to get him Christian, so now we got to get married. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this back and forth with marriage, because I feel like we have done this, you know, in the last part. I've said a lot. I mean, I'll say a little bit more, but they invite this this friend, that the only friend they have left, really, the widow Edlin, to come witness their marriage. She's the only one. She brings gifts. But once Sue starts looking at the contract, I guess, the legal terms, she just says, you know, it just spoils the sentiment, doesn't it? I can't get over this. And, you know, they're, let me just read this little part too. Okay, she says, it spoils the sentiment, doesn't it? She said on their way home, it seems making a more sordid business of it than signing the contract in a vestry. There is a little poetry in church, and she's always making like, I can't do it here. Maybe here. This just doesn't feel right. But we'll try to get through it. And she always says, we'll try to get through it. When really it's her that can't get through it. We will. And then he quotes Deuteronomy and says, for what is he that hath betrothed a wife and hath not taken her? Hello? Just think about what that says. And she says, let him go return into his house, lest he die in the battle and another man take her. You know, let's consecrate this. And it says, so the Jewish lawgiver, and she says, well, how do you know the scriptures, Jude? You really ought to have been a parson. I can only quote profane writers. And so then, okay, so they try to go, and I'm just going to summarize a little bit. Oh, before they try to go, the widow Edlin tells them a little story about what I assume is, she says, in her grandfather's time. So this is someone in Jude and Sue's family, maybe a great aunt, uncle. And it's a very unhappy story about how this couple fought, and then she ran away with the baby, and the baby died, and he wanted the body, and he stole the body, and eventually he was hanged for this. Okay? Very unhappy story. That the child, Father Time, is listening to this story, and he makes the comment, you know, he's calling Sue mother very quickly, and he says, you know, if I were you, mother, I wouldn't marry father. So remember, he sees everything before. And that's also a kind of a different observation of, what is this child going to notice about Sue and Jude? You know, he's going to pick up on what people are saying about them. He's going to pick up on their money situation, why they have to move all the time. Because he can see things beyond just the literal. Like most children just see literal, and he explained, you know, he sees the whole universal, which is not healthy for a child. You shouldn't see it till you're old. And, you know, Sue says, you know, it's only a tale, but, you know, it's just another little thing about why would Father Time come to that conclusion? Because he can see almost like the sins of the father. Look what happens to these people when they get married. It's a tragedy. And so there's that little bit. And then they go and they're going to go to like a court to get married. They're watching somebody ahead of them. She's got a black eye. It looks like she just dragged him from prison and said, you're going to marry me. Maybe she's pregnant. Not a happy scene. And Sue's just watching this like, oh my God, I can't. Not after seeing that. I just can't. maybe we should go to a church. Maybe we should. And then they get to a church, and she makes this comment, as they're watching them, and she says, it's not the same to her, poor thing, as it would be to me doing it over again with my present knowledge, Sue whispered. You see, they're fresh to it and take the proceedings as a matter of course. But having been awakened to its awful solemnity as we have, or as least as I have by experience, and to my own too squeamish feelings perhaps, sometimes it really does seem immoral in me to go and undertake the same thing again with open eyes. Coming in here and seeing this has frightened me from a church wedding as much as the other did from a registry one. We are a weak, tremulous pair, Jude, and what others may feel confident in, I feel doubts of. My being proof against the sordid conditions of a business contract again. So, it sounds like the widow came a long way for nothing. She's like, what's wrong with you people? We had no problem marrying back in the day. There's these silly questions, and why are you making things so complicated? And it's usually like the older generation saying, what's wrong with you people? We all had mental illnesses. My mother was crazy. Nobody did anything with her. What's wrong with this generation? They're always saying things like that. But time changes people, and they start to see, okay, there's not something's going on here. We need help, or this marriage isn't okay. We should have never got married. We were too young. And Sue says, when people get to a certain, age, what are they going to say about us? And she's not wrong. What are we saying about Victorian times? Look at how they treated children. And, but if you tried to talk to somebody who was of that generation, I would say, well, what do you mean you spoil your kids? Like every generation thinks that every, mother that comes after is just more of a helicopter parent. And maybe some people are. I was probably more of a neglectful one in some ways in comparison. But, everybody has this, you don't know what, our generation was like. So Sue kind of makes a comment like this. She still held that they were not that much queer or exceptional in them, that they all were so. Everybody is getting to feel as we do. They're just not catching up to it yet. We are little beforehand, that's all. In 50, 100 years, the descendants of these two will act and feel worse than we. We will see weltering humanity still more vividly than we do now, as shapes like our own selves, hideously multiplied, and will be afraid to reproduce them. He's quoting Shelley. What a terrible line of poetry. Though I have felt it myself about my fellow creatures at morbid times. And if you look at that line of poetry, it's almost like it's referring to themselves being multiplied of this ancestral sin. And what do it's like, you look back at your family and you start to trace backwards. Yes, your great-grandfather was that way. Well, the general question is not our business, and why should we plague ourselves about it? However different our reasons are, we come to the same conclusion, that for our particular two, an irrecoverable oath is risky. Then, Jude, let us go home without killing our dream. Yes, how good you are, my friend. You give way to all my whims. They accord very much to my own, says Jude, which they don't really. He wants to get married, but he understands. They philosophize about this to a certain extent. They like to listen to each other's intellectual side. It's part of the attraction. So in the next chapter, they're going about their merry way, still unmarried. Not just kind of oblivious to what people are going to see and think at this point. And they decide to go to a fair that's a little bit out of the ways. I think he calls it like Stoke Bare Hills. And this is a like a festival. I mean, festivals have been around for ages and ages. It's more of a in Wessex, which is what he calls pretty much all of his, like his map of where Dorset is, where he's from, the agricultural show. Okay, so they bring the child with them. They're wanting to do just exactly what we do when we take our kids somewhere and take them to the zoo, or, you know, just get them out, get them interested. But it seems like he's kind of forgotten. And who would you know shows up but Arabella and her husband. And I'll just describe, just as a contrast, what her husband looks like. There's a little bit of description that he's a rather bloated man with a globular stomach and small legs, resembling a top on two pegs. This is very much a Dickens-esque description, although Dickens would do it better. He's funny, to be honest. But anyways, you get the idea. The idea is to get an image, and especially in contrast to Jude. Of course she's not going to be attracted to this husband, but that's not part of the deal with Arabella. I mean, Arabella is, she's a businesswoman in a way. And in marriage, you know, it's kind of ironic, this is just coming to me. It's like, Sue keeps talking about how much she hates that it's a business contract. Arabella understands that it's a business contract, and she's fine with that. Because that's the way things are. But you do see some jealousy here on Arabella's part, which it gets very strange by the end of this chapter to me. And I guess I'll explain why later. But she sees them. They don't see her. They're in their own little world together. They're just, you know, walking on air. And Arabella sees this, and she points out to her husband and says, "You see those people over there? That's my ex-husband." You know, and, you know, he checks them out, and he looks at them, and he says, "Oh, they're rather fond of one another and of their child, seemingly," continued the publican. "Their child? Isn't their child," said Arabella with curious sudden covetousness. "They haven't been married long enough for it to be theirs." But although the smoldering maternal instinct was strong enough in her to lead her to squash her husband's conjecture, she was not disposed on second thoughts to be more candid than necessary. I mean, I can't give too much away. And I don't think Mr. Carlett could, you know, has any inkling of this whatsoever anyways. And says, you know, Mr. Carlett had no other idea that his wife's child by her first husband was with, you know, with his grandparents at Antipodes. So she becomes extremely interested in following Jude and Sue and watching this, even though it's probably tormenting her. I mean, she's got to have a little bit of maternal instinct. You know, she's not, even though she's rather careless, as we've seen, it's going to bother her to see this child, especially with Sue, and then to see the way Sue and Jude act with each other. Jude never acted that way with Arabella. You know, he might have been physically attracted to her, but physical attraction, you know, it's temporary, really, I think. I mean, you can still be attracted to the person, but there's got to be something else there, too, that you're attracted to make it last. And so she says, "How she sticks to him," said Arabella. "Oh, no, I fancy they are not married, or they wouldn't be so much to one another as that. I wonder. But I thought you said he did marry her." "I heard he was going to. That's all. Going to make another attempt after putting it off once or twice. As far as they themselves are concerned, they are only two in the show. I should be ashamed of making myself so silly if I were he. I don't see how there's anything remarkable in their behavior. I should never have noticed their being in love if you hadn't said so. You never see anything," she rejoined. And, you know, like I've said before, she's a very keen judge of character. And she makes very good assessments here. Nonetheless, Carlet's view of the lovers or married pair's conduct was undoubtedly that of the general crowd, whose attention seemed to be in no way attracted by what Arbella's sharpened vision discerned. He's charmed by her, as if she were some fairy, continued Arbella. See how he looks round her, lets his eyes rest on her. I am inclined to think that she don't care for him quite as much as he does for her. She's not particular warm-hearted creature to my thinking, though she cares for him pretty mightily much as she's able to. And he could make her heart ache a bit if he liked to try, which he's too simple to do. There now, they're going across the cart horse sheds. Come along. And she wants to keep following him. And, you know, the husband's like, I want to go have a drink, okay? And she's like, wait, but that's all you do. What are you talking about? And, you know, and she's like, well, I tell you what, how about I go do what I want to do and you go do what you want to do and then we'll meet up. And so basically, so she can go follow them around. She just can't stop looking at it like a bad accident. And in the meantime, she sees her friend, Annie, from way back, you know. And so she comes up to Annie and she says, have you met Jude and his young woman or wife or whatever she is? I saw them by now. No, not a glimpse of them for years. Well, they're close by here somewhere. Yes, there they are, by the gray horse. Oh, that's his present young woman. Wife, you say. Has he married her? I don't know. She's pretty, isn't she? Yes, nothing to complain of or jump at. Not much to depend on. Slim, fidgety little thing like that. And notice how the contrast, you know, when she sees Arbella, she says she's full-figured, you know, fleshy thing. And then the contrast is her being this fidgety little, you know, slight thing. He's a nice-looking chap, too, now looking at Jude. You ought to have stuck to Arbella. I don't know, but I ought, murmured she. Annie laughed. That's you, Arbella, always wanting another man than your own. Well, and what woman don't, I should like to know. As for that body with him, she don't know what love is, at least what I call love. I can see in her face, she don't. And perhaps, Abby dear, you don't know what she calls love. So you can definitely see that this is a little bit of a jealousy thing. Not just because of the child, though, but for Jude, too. Which I'll talk about later when this kind of comes out, because I have a hard time believing this part, to be honest with you, because I just don't feel like it's all that believable, but it makes sense for what is going to happen. Most people, being someone who's been married and been divorced, don't ever look back and think, gosh, I should have stuck with him. I really don't think most people do that, just because after you've been married, you know what it was like. And it was, you know, she was bored with him. You know, she was never that interested in him. But then again, you have to think, okay, Arbella, not a lot of options out there, right? You know, he looks better than the one she has now. And so, let's see what happens next. Oh, okay, so they're not really minding these people at all. And, the doctor that was like the witch doctor guy that would sell these strange pills, he suddenly appears. Everybody's coming back together. And she says, oh, did you see my ex-husband? You know, he's here. And Dr. Filbert says, oh, you know, I taught him these dead languages. And he caught on, you know, and really he cheated him. It's almost like he and Arbella really ought to get together. But she says, well, what happened? He says, what happened to your man? And she says, I lost him, but it's not like you think. You know, we were untied by the law, and that's his, you know, woman over there. And he says, oh, he looks very fond of her, you know, so he can tell. And she says, they say they're cousins. And he says, well, you know, cousins, you know, that could account for the attraction. You know, it's convenient. So they're walking around. She's still commenting, saying silly fools like children. you know, obviously they're being, she's watching them just be very flirtatious and sweet with each other. And then Hardy switches over to the scene where actually Sue and Jude are admiring these flowers, and Sue's wanting to learn all the names of the flowers, and she says something like, I just like to, you know, put my face in these little deers, and Jude playfully acts like he's, you know, go ahead, and she says, you know, if a police officer comes by, I'm going to say that this is my husband doing this to me, and they're having this bit of flirtatious, happy moment. But he asks her, are you happy? And she says, well, yeah, you know. He's like, are you happy because we're here together? And she starts getting evasive again and says, hey, I'm happy because I'm improving my mind. As slippery as an eel, like he says. And anyways, it says at the end of this chapter that there was this immediate shadow, however. They forgot about little father time, you know. They've been having so much fun. So they try to get him interested in the flowers. And he says, I am very, very sorry, Mother and Father, he said. But please don't mind. I can't help it. I should like the flowers very, very much. If I didn't keep on thinking, they'd be withered in just a few days. So, at any rate, I think I'll leave you with that and then finish this next section next week. All right, thanks for listening.